Kaunas, Lithuania, July 1940. A Japanese diplomat sits alone at his desk. Before him, a stack of papers, a fountain pen, and a line of frightened faces outside his window. He writes, hour after hour, 18 to 20 hours a day. Each stroke of his pen is a lifeline. Each visa he signs means another family might live. Outside, hundreds wait, men, women, children, clutching whatever they could carry. They've escaped the Nazi invasion, fled from Poland, from war, from death itself. And now they've come here, to one man, hoping for a miracle. Tokyo sends an order, stop immediately, then another, and another. But he doesn't stop. He keeps writing until his hand bleeds to save people his own government had called not worth saving. His name was Chiune Sugihara, a career diplomat, a husband, a father of 3, and in one extraordinary summer, he made a choice between obedience and humanity. He chose humanity. By the time he was forced to stop, he had handwritten thousands of transit visas, enough to save more than 6,000 lives. And today, over 40,000 people live because of him. The children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of those he saved. This is not just a story from history. It's a reminder that one person with nothing but a pen and a conscience can change the world. If stories like this move you, if you believe compassion still matters, make sure to subscribe and join us on this journey through the untold lives of extraordinary people. Because sometimes the smallest act of courage can save the world. Chapter 1: The Diplomat and the Dreamer. Chiune Sugihara was not born a hero. In fact, as a boy growing up in the quiet town of Yaotsu in Gifu Prefecture, Japan, he was remarkably ordinary, curious, thoughtful, and quietly ambitious. He loved books, the smell of ink, and the sound of words written with care. He loved stories of faraway places, of people whose lives were different from his own. It was the spark of curiosity paired with a deep sense of fairness that shaped the man he would become. From an early age, Sugihara displayed an unusual sense of responsibility. His parents instilled in him the importance of diligence and integrity, not just for personal gain, but for the good of others. He learned that loyalty was more than obedience. It was commitment to a principle, to a purpose beyond oneself. That understanding quietly guided him as he grew, shaping his ambitions and his character. Sugihara's education was rigorous. He excelled in languages, devouring English, German, and Russian with a diligence that amazed his teachers. Each new language opened a window to a world he had only imagined. Letters, newspapers, travelers' stories, all giving him glimpses of distant lives and complex societies. He began to understand that people were not just names or statistics, but living, breathing individuals with hopes, fears, and stories that demanded attention. It was this combination of curiosity, moral awareness, and diligence that drew him to diplomacy. The Japanese Foreign Ministry represented an opportunity to serve his country, to engage with the wider world, and to navigate the delicate art of understanding people and nations. He saw diplomacy as a noble calling, a way to balance loyalty to one's country with empathy for others. Even in his earliest postings abroad, Sugihara showed both competence and compassion. Colleagues admired his conscientiousness. He learned quickly, adapted quietly, and always considered the human consequences of his decisions. He listened more than he spoke, observed more than he acted, and thought carefully before making any move. Those who worked with him often noted his calm presence, a kind of quiet gravity that suggested a man who measured the weight of every choice, who understood that decisions could ripple far beyond the moment. Yet, beneath his professional demeanor, Sugihara carried the heart of a dreamer. He imagined what the world could be if individuals were not bound solely by rules and hierarchy, but guided by empathy and understanding. He imagined small acts of kindness and justice, acts that could quietly shift the course of someone's life. That inner compass, the sense of right and wrong that existed independently of orders or regulations, was developing even as he learned to navigate the formalities of diplomatic life. Sugihara's travels shaped this perspective. He moved through countries with vastly different cultures, observing both the grandeur and the suffering of human societies. In each new city, he noticed the people often overlooked, the poor, the refugees, the forgotten. And he asked himself quietly, how can we help those who cannot help themselves? Even as a young diplomat, Sugihara wrestled with a tension that would define his later life, the pull between duty and conscience. He understood the importance of following orders. He understood the prestige and security that came with loyalty. And yet, he already recognized that rules alone could not define morality. That there were times when the human heart demanded action beyond protocol, beyond comfort, beyond fear. This tension, subtle but persistent, was like a quiet drumbeat in his life. It foreshadowed the moral dilemmas that would come when the world itself descended into chaos, when war, hatred, and desperation collided in a way that would call on him to make choices no one had imagined a bureaucrat could face. Chiune Sugihara was, in many ways, still just a man with dreams. Dreams of service, dreams of understanding the world, dreams of doing right in small, quiet ways. But beneath those dreams, a seed of courage was already taking root. A seed that would one day grow in a summer, shadowed by fear and danger, forcing him to choose between obedience and humanity, between his career and thousands of lives. In the quiet moments of his youth, walking the streets of foreign cities or reading by lamplight, Sugihara could not have known the weight of the choices he would face. He could not know that his pen would one day carry the power to save lives, that his conscience would confront the machinery of war, or that the ripple of one man's empathy could stretch across decades and continents. But the essence of the man was already there. Conscientious, loyal, deeply thoughtful, and profoundly human. The diplomat had been born. The dreamer was awake. Chapter 2: The Summer of Shadows. Summer 1940 in Kaunas, Lithuania, was deceptively calm. The streets shimmered with heat and the sky hung heavy, like a curtain pressed over the city. But beneath that surface of quiet, the world was unraveling. Nazi Germany had already occupied Poland. Fear and uncertainty had spread like wildfire across Eastern Europe. Families were fleeing, homes had been destroyed, communities had vanished, and those who could leave tried desperately to do so. Chiune Sugihara arrived at the Japanese consulate in Kaunas in the early summer, unaware that this posting would test him in ways no training, no rules, no manual could have prepared him for. The consulate itself was modest, a 2-story building that seemed almost too small for the enormity of what was about to unfold. Sugihara walked through the halls and examined the offices, noting the orderly desks, the stacks of forms, the stamped envelopes ready for dispatch. Everything was methodical. Everything was precise. Everything was in order. And then the people arrived. At first, it was a trickle. A man clutching a suitcase. A woman carrying a child. A small group of weary travelers seeking a way out. They came with trembling hands, desperate eyes, and documents that bore evidence of a life upended. They were Jews escaping Nazi-occupied territories, families who had already lost friends, neighbors, and sometimes entire villages. They had heard, through rumors and whispers, that a Japanese diplomat might be able to help them, that there was a path to transit visas, a slim chance of safety. Sugihara watched them from his office window. He noticed the little things. A mother soothing a crying infant. An elderly man leaning heavily on a cane. A young boy clutching a sibling's hand. Each gesture was ordinary, yet extraordinary when framed by the desperation that brought them here. Every face was etched with fear, exhaustion, and hope, all at once. As the days passed, the trickle became a flood. Lines formed outside the consulate gates, winding down the street. Every morning brought new faces, new stories, new pleas. And every day, Sugihara felt the weight of his dual obligations pressing on him. On one hand, there was his duty as a Japanese diplomat. Follow the rules, respect orders, maintain decorum. On the other hand, there was his conscience, whispering that no regulation could justify turning away people who might die without his help. The psychological tension was almost unbearable. He would sit at his desk, hands folded, staring at the faces in the window, and feel a knot tightening in his chest. Should he strictly adhere to protocol and protect his career? Or should he act, knowing that each day of delay could cost lives? The rules were clear. The potential consequences, personal and professional, were severe. Yet the moral imperative, the simple, undeniable humanity in front of him, was even clearer. Small human moments pierced through the anxiety. Sugihara noticed a little girl clutching a worn doll, her eyes wide with wonder despite everything she had endured. He saw a father gently lifting his elderly mother onto a bench, whispering reassurance into her ear, even as he himself trembled. He watched a teenage boy offer his meager rations to a younger child, showing generosity in the midst of scarcity. Each moment reminded him that these were not numbers or cases. They were people, each with a life worth saving. The crowd grew steadily, and so did the urgency. Families arrived at dawn, waiting in the sweltering heat. Some had walked for days. Some had traveled on trains crammed with strangers. Each new arrival reminded Sugihara of the scale of the crisis and the stakes of every decision he made. Every handshake, every exchange of papers, every question asked quietly in his office brought him closer to an invisible line. A line where obedience might mean death, and defiance might mean salvation. The shadows of war stretched over the city, and in the consulate, Chiune Sugihara began to feel the weight of history pressing down. He knew that soon, decisions would have to be made. That soon, the safe, orderly world of rules and instructions would collide with the chaotic, human world of suffering and need. That soon, he would have to choose between duty and conscience, career and morality, comfort and courage. Even as he walked the corridors of the consulate, attending to routine paperwork and diplomatic matters, Sugihara felt a quiet stirring deep within. It was the same curiosity and empathy that had guided him as a boy, now intensified by the immediacy of life and death. He felt a growing sense that what lay ahead was no ordinary assignment, that the summer of shadows had only just begun. And somewhere, in the midst of heat, fear, and mounting pressure, Sugihara sensed that he would not be able to remain a passive observer, that the rules and orders he had spent a lifetime respecting would soon be tested, not by theory, not by hypothetical scenarios, but by real, living souls staring at him with hope, desperation, and trust. The summer was long, and the shadows were deep, but the first glimmers of his courage, quiet and unassuming, had begun to shine. Chapter 3. 3 Messages from Tokyo. The days in Kaunas were growing heavier. Each morning Sugihara awoke to the same scene. Hundreds of faces pressed against the consulate gates, each pair of eyes carrying a story, each hand holding the fragile hope of survival. The line seemed endless, and yet the world beyond his office walls continued with its indifference. Bureaucrats, governments, and orders moving with cold precision. Chiune Sugihara knew the rules. He had spent years learning them, perfecting the art of diplomacy, observing hierarchy, and respecting protocol. But rules, he was beginning to realize, were powerless in the face of human desperation. They could not measure the fear of a mother clutching her child. They could not account for the terror of a man who had lost everything, wandering aimlessly in search of safety. And yet those rules would soon come directly to him in the form of messages from Tokyo. The first telegram arrived on a quiet morning. Sugihara's hands, still trembling from the previous day's long hours, carefully opened the envelope. The message was formal, concise. Request denied. These refugees do not meet the required criteria. Do not issue visas. He read it again, hoping to find some hidden leeway. There was none. His pulse quickened. Outside, a small boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, holding a piece of paper as if it were a lifeline. And in a way it was. Sugihara felt a deep knot of anxiety. If he obeyed, these people might never escape. If he disobeyed, the consequences could be severe: dismissal, disgrace, even threats to his family. He sat in silence, staring at the telegram, weighing duty against conscience. His thoughts drifted to Yukiko, his wife, who had always supported him, who had known the depths of his empathy and quiet courage. "What should I do?" he whispered to himself, though he knew she was near, listening. Later that afternoon, the second message arrived. The words were sterner, more urgent. Cease immediately. Compliance with instructions is mandatory. No exceptions. Sugihara's chest tightened. The moral tension was unbearable. He walked the halls of the consulate, passing the waiting refugees who had grown accustomed to his presence. He recognized some faces now. A mother humming softly to soothe her baby. A teenager offering bread to a younger child. A man shaking from exhaustion, but still holding his mother's hand. Each human gesture reminded him that these were lives, not documents. He found Yukiko in the kitchen, carefully preparing tea. Her presence was steady, grounding, comforting. "I can't just follow orders," he said quietly, the weight of the telegrams pressing on him. "They'll die if I do nothing." Yukiko placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then don't. You know what is right. We will face it together," he said. Her words, simple and unwavering, stirred something in him, a clarity that cut through fear and doubt. Yet fear still lingered. Career, reputation, security, family, all of it hung in the balance. He thought of his children, sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware that their father might soon risk everything to save strangers. The third telegram was almost accusatory. Immediate cessation of all visa issuance. Further disobedience will result in consequences for you and your family. This is your final warning. Sugihara held the paper in his hands. 3 times Tokyo had said no. 3 times he had been warned. 3 times the choice had been made for him, to obey. And 3 times his conscience rebelled. He returned to his desk and stared at the blank forms. His pen lay there, innocuous yet heavy with possibility. Every signature could be a lifeline. Every stamp could be a promise of survival. He knew the risk. He knew the consequences. He also knew that inaction was not neutral. It was lethal. The waiting grew outside, each face a silent plea, each presence a challenge to the rules that bound him. Sugihara could feel the tension building in his chest, a pressure that could not be measured or ignored. He had studied diplomacy, strategy, and protocol, yet none of it prepared him for the moral weight pressing down now. He thought of the families he had already met, the children, the elderly, the mothers clutching infants, the fathers who could do nothing but hope. Their lives were fragile threads, and he held the scissors. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, Sugihara made his decision. He picked up the pen. He would write. He would write, despite orders, despite fear, despite the certainty of consequences. He would write because humanity demanded it. He would write because he could. The first visa was signed, the second, the third. With each stroke of the pen, Sugihara felt the tension shift. Fear mingled with resolve. Anxiety mingled with purpose. He was no longer merely a diplomat. He was a witness, a guardian, a conduit of hope. Outside, the line waited. Families who had traveled for days, for weeks, for months, waited for a chance to live. And now, for the first time, hope was tangible. held in the ink of one man's conscience. In that moment, the world narrowed to a desk, a pen, and a line of desperate humanity stretching into the horizon. 3 messages from Tokyo had come, each demanding obedience, and 3 times Sugihara had chosen differently. He had chosen to write, and in that choice, he had begun to change history. Chapter 4. The Hand That Wouldn't Stop Writing. The days in Kaunas blurred together like ink spreading across a page. From dawn until late into the night, the Japanese consulate became a small, tense theater of human desperation, and at its center sat Chiune Sugihara, pen in hand, deciding who would live and who might not. The act of writing should have been simple. Fill in names, birth dates, destinations. Stamp, sign, hand over. But these were no ordinary signatures. Each mark of ink on paper carried the weight of life itself. One miswritten letter, one smudged stamp, could mean a train denied, a border closed, a life extinguished. The enormity of it pressed on Sugihara with every stroke. He began before sunrise, the room still dim, the morning light not yet strong enough to chase away the shadows. Paper stacked high in neat piles, refugees waiting just outside. Their hope fragile, yet palpable. His first visas were tentative, careful. The pen felt heavy in his hand, as if the ink itself carried the moral responsibility of the lives he was about to touch. Hours passed, then days, then weeks. Sugihara wrote without pause, sometimes 16, 18, 20 hours a day. His fingers cramped and stiffened, his eyes blurred from exhaustion. Sometimes the pen slipped, and he would pause, breathe, and begin again. He could not afford mistakes. Not now. Not ever. Yukiko sat nearby, silently observing, offering quiet sustenance. She brought him tea and small meals he rarely touched. She massaged his hands when they cramped from too many signatures. She held the youngest child so he could concentrate. She never asked him to stop. She never questioned his choices. She understood the stakes. She understood that every word, every stroke, was more than ink. It was salvation. The procedures themselves were intricate. Each visa required verification, the refugee's identity, the intended final destination, the transit plan through Japan. He had to ensure the forms were filled accurately, cross-checking every name, every date, every city. Mistakes could lead to detention or worse. He stamped each document carefully, the official seal a lifeline embossed in ink. Every signature was deliberate, precise. A silent vow. You shall live. And yet, the human stories were never far from his mind. Each person who approached the desk had a life behind them. Each conversation, a window into suffering, fear, and hope. A father who had walked for days carrying his sick daughter, who whispered his gratitude as Sugihara scribbled her name on a form. A young mother holding twins, one of them crying, clutching the pen as if it were a magic wand that could erase the nightmare that pursued them. A teenage boy delivering messages for his family, too timid to look Sugihara in the eye, trembling with both fear and anticipation. These moments anchored Sugihara. They reminded him why he could not stop. They reminded him that the line of people outside the consulate, growing longer, moving slower with each passing day, were not mere statistics. They were parents, children, elders, each one dependent on the unremarkable man in the unremarkable office. The physical toll was immense. His back ached from hours hunched over the desk, eyes blurred from exhaustion and candlelight when natural daylight faded. Ink smeared across fingers, hands coarsened and cracked from relentless writing. He barely noticed the passage of meals or sleep. Fatigue became a constant companion. Yet his determination did not waver. Every new person who stepped forward reignited his focus. The psychological weight, however, was heavier. Telegrams from Tokyo continued to arrive, warning him to stop. Official instructions demanded obedience. Every letter was a reminder that he was defying authority, risking career, livelihood, and family security. And yet, as he looked into the eyes of each refugee, he felt the pull of conscience stronger than the pull of command. Rules were paper, lives were human, and human lives, he realized, must always outweigh bureaucracy. Sugihara often paused to reflect. What drove him to continue? Not heroism, he would have said later. Not desire for recognition or admiration. It was a simple, profound understanding. These people were human, and they needed help. The morality of the act was its own justification. He did not see himself as extraordinary. He saw the choice as clear, unavoidable. If he could write, if he could save, he must. And so he wrote. Pile after pile of visas, forms meticulously completed, stamped, and handed over. Sometimes he wrote on the train station steps when the consulate gates were overwhelmed. Sometimes he signed blank forms and tossed them over fences for families to fill themselves. Improvised, imperfect, but always necessary. Each pen stroke a heartbeat, each visa a bridge across fear and death. The scale was staggering. Thousands came each day. The line outside the consulate wound through streets and alleys. Some had traveled for days, others for weeks. Each arrived with nothing but hope and papers, hoping that the man inside would see their humanity and act. And he did. Sugihara wrote for 29 days. 29 days of relentless commitment, of hands stiffening, eyes straining, body aching, yet spirit enduring. Thousands of visas flowed from his pen. Estimates vary between 2,000 to 6,000. Each a ticket to survival. Each a promise kept. In quiet moments, he would lean back, rubbing his eyes, massaging his hands, reflecting on what he was doing. There was no exhilaration, no triumph, just a deep grounding sense that he was following the only path available to him, the path of conscience, guided by the smallest instruments, pen and paper, and by the simplest human truth. To do nothing would be to betray life itself. And through it all, Yukiko remained by his side, unwavering. She was the quiet force behind the pen, the gentle encouragement, the silent affirmation. Without her, the endless writing might have faltered. With her, it became a sacred act, a quiet rebellion against fear, indifference, and death. By the end of that month, Sugihara's hand ached beyond measure. His eyes could barely focus. But the visas had been written. Thousands had crossed his desk, passed through the gates, and embarked on the perilous journey towards survival. And though he did not yet know the full measure of his actions, one thing was clear. His hand would not stop, because life demanded it. For Chiune Sugihara, the act of writing had become both duty and devotion, courage and compassion intertwined. Every signature was a heartbeat. Every stamp was a prayer. And every person saved was a testament to the quiet, human heroism that could emerge, even in the darkest of times. Chapter 5. The Last Train. The final days at Kaunas consulate were a whirlwind. Summer had deepened, the heat thickening the air, and yet, outside, the line of refugees never seemed to thin. Families pressed against the gates, clutching whatever documents and hopes they could carry. Each face told a story of peril, of flight, of lives hanging by a fragile thread. And at the center of it all sat Chiune Sugihara, exhausted beyond measure, yet unable to stop. The telegrams from Tokyo had grown more urgent, more threatening. The consulate was to close. The Soviet authorities were preparing to take over. Time was slipping away like sand through his fingers. And still, the people waited. Some had traveled for weeks, some even months, hoping against hope that the Japanese diplomat would help them cross into safety. Sugihara knew that if he stopped now, many of them would have nowhere else to turn. He adapted. When the consulate was overflowing, he would write on the go. He carried visas onto the platform at the train station, scribbling names while the engine steamed and whistles blew. Families gathered close, leaning over the barriers, straining to see the forms, hoping he would remember their names, their faces, their lives. When necessary, he passed incomplete papers through windows, trusting parents to fill in missing details. It was improvisation born of urgency, and it worked. Somehow, against all odds, lives were saved. The chaos was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. Sugihara's hands cramped from hours of writing, fingers stiff and raw. His eyes were blurred from fatigue, yet he could not afford to falter. He often paused only to breathe, to stretch, to glance at the faces of those around him. Children clung to mothers. Fathers tried to soothe infants. Elders leaned heavily on walking sticks. Each face reinforced the stakes. Each gesture amplified the moral gravity of his work. Despite exhaustion, there were moments of quiet clarity. He would notice a young boy handing a loaf of bread to a sister, or a mother whispering encouragement to a crying child. He would see a father steady his elderly mother as they navigated the crowded streets. These small acts, these tiny displays of humanity, reminded Sugihara of the value of his own choices. The visas he wrote were more than paper. They were lifelines, bridges to survival, glimpses of hope in a world overrun by fear and violence.
Farewells began to take on a heavy weight. Families he had helped would approach him, shaking hands, bowing deeply, whispering words of thanks he could barely comprehend. Some offered gifts, small tokens of gratitude, a hand-carved trinket, a scrap of cloth, a pressed flower. Others simply looked into his eyes, silent but expressive, their survival itself a testament to his courage. Sugihara, ever humble, accepted none of it with fanfare. He nodded, smiled gently, and returned to the task at hand. There was still too much to do, still too many lives in his hands. On the day the consulate officially closed, the lines were longer than ever. Families had gathered at the gates from before dawn. Some had walked for days. Others had waited through weeks of uncertainty, clinging to hope as their only guide. Sugihara worked until the very last moment, signing, stamping, and handing over papers with hands that shook from fatigue. Every signature was deliberate, every stamp a prayer. Even on the train platform, he continued. As the engines rumbled, as steam and smoke enveloped the station, he scribbled names on visas, passing them through windows to families who had arrived at the last possible moment. Some of the refugees ran alongside the moving train, hands outstretched, calling his name, waving forms that were incomplete, yet life-saving. Sugihara continued to write until the train had carried the last families away. And then, for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to pause.
Exhaustion washed over him, but so did a quiet sense of fulfillment. The toll of fatigue, stress, and fear of consequences seemed less significant against the weight of lives he had saved. Sugihara understood in that moment that the moral cost of inaction would have been far greater than any personal or professional loss. Yet, he could not ignore the personal risk he had taken, defying orders, bending rules, risking career and reputation. The consequences would follow him, quietly, like shadows behind him. Yukiko stayed close, observing quietly, supporting him without words. Together, they had endured the relentless days, the crushing responsibility, and the constant tension between duty and conscience. Now, as they prepared to leave Lithuania, they both understood that the cost of compassion could be high, yet the rewards, the lives saved, the hope preserved, were immeasurable. As Sugihara boarded the train, leaving Kaunas and the consulate behind, he looked out over the city one last time. The streets, once quiet in the summer heat, were now etched in his memory with the faces of those he had helped. Fathers, mothers, children, elders, countless lives intertwined with his own in a fleeting yet eternal act of humanity. He did not know the full impact of his work. He did not know how many would survive, where they would go, or what lives they would build. But he knew this. He had acted. He had chosen to place humanity above obedience, compassion above rules, life above career.
and in that quiet reflection,
as the train carried him toward the uncertainty of the future, Sugihara felt the weight of history, the cost of courage, the value of empathy, and the enduring significance of a single man who had refused to look away. The last train had departed, carrying hope in the form of ink and paper. And Chiune Sugihara, exhausted yet resolute, began the journey home, leaving behind a legacy that even he could not yet fully comprehend. Chapter 6: The Price of Compassion. Chiune Sugihara returned to Japan in 1940 with a heart both heavy and full. Heavy from the weight of war, from the uncertainty of the lives he had tried to save, from the knowledge that his actions, however righteous, had defied his government's direct orders. Full, because in the small human victories, the visas, the names, the faces, he had done what he felt was right. But the welcome at home was not warm. The Japanese Foreign Ministry, upon reviewing his actions, saw only defiance. The official explanation for his dismissal was staff reduction, a vague bureaucratic excuse that scarcely concealed the truth. Sugihara had disobeyed orders. The man who had saved thousands of lives now found himself stripped of his career, his diplomatic identity dissolved in the ink of his moral choice. Returning home, Sugihara faced the practicalities of life with sudden sharpness. He had a family to support. His wife, Yukiko, steadfast and patient, and their 3 young children, whose needs continued, regardless of their father's professional standing. The transition was difficult. The world that had once seemed secure and predictable now required navigation through uncertainty, modest means, and unexpected toil. Sugihara took what work he could find. Odd jobs became a part of his life, selling light bulbs door to door, working for small trading companies, navigating the quiet challenges of everyday survival. Each task, however humble, was done with diligence, a reflection of the same conscientious spirit that had guided him through the consulate in Kaunas. Though the prestige of diplomacy was gone, the discipline and attention to detail that had defined him remained intact. Life at home became the center of his universe. Yukiko supported him unwaveringly, managing the household and nurturing the children while he adjusted to his new reality. Together, they found comfort in small, ordinary moments. Evening walks with the children, quiet meals shared at the table, the laughter of their youngest echoing through modest rooms. Sugihara found a sense of stability in these rhythms, a grounding force amid the lingering echoes of lost status. Yet it was not only practical adjustments that tested him. The psychological weight of his choices, the knowledge that he had sacrificed career, reputation, and security, bore upon him in quiet, persistent ways. There were moments of doubt, fleeting questions of whether he had been reckless, whether the cost to his family was too high, whether the world would ever recognize what he had done. These thoughts, however, never stopped him from sleeping, from waking, from living with purpose.
In place of recognition, Sugihara cultivated something deeper: moral clarity. He knew that the lives saved were real. Thousands of men, women, and children had crossed borders, survived, and continued their stories because he had acted. That knowledge became a quiet, sustaining victory, one that neither status nor society could diminish. Each morning he awoke, he carried with him a sense of fulfillment that no office or title could provide. Odd jobs and small tasks became stages for reflection. Walking through the streets, selling goods, interacting with neighbors, performing mundane labor. Sugihara often considered the contrast between obedience and conscience. He had chosen the latter at great personal cost. Yet in doing so, he had preserved his integrity, his humanity. No reprimand, no dismissal, no bureaucratic indignity could erase that. Family life became a sanctuary. Watching his children grow, seeing their curiosity and laughter, he found renewal. The mundane routines, helping with homework, repairing a leaky faucet, sharing evening tea with Yukiko, were imbued with quiet joy. These small details were, in a sense, victories of a different kind. The triumph of love, stability, and moral persistence over loss and adversity. Sugihara did not speak often of Kaunas, of the refugees, of the thousands of lives he had touched. He did not seek admiration or recognition. To him, his actions were ordinary, almost inevitable in the presence of human suffering. "I did what any person would do," he would say. Yet in that humility lay extraordinary courage. The moral act had been taken without expectation of reward, without hope of applause, without need for validation. His psychological resilience was remarkable. He endured the loss of professional identity without bitterness, sustaining himself through purpose rather than prestige. Every odd job, every family dinner, every simple evening spent with his children reinforced a life built on principles rather than accolades. His victories were quiet, internal, but profound. The enduring knowledge that he had chosen humanity over obedience, life over conformity. In the end, the price he paid was tangible. A career gone, social standing diminished, financial strain endured. But the reward was enduring, intangible, and deeply human. The preservation of conscience, the confirmation of moral courage, the proof that one person's choices can ripple across time, shaping the lives of thousands. Sugihara had lived the truth that saving others is not always recognized in its moment. It often exists quietly, waiting to be discovered by future generations. Through the modesty of his daily life, the quiet support of Yukiko, and the laughter of his children, Chiune Sugihara carried forward a life of purpose and meaning. Though the world may have judged him harshly in the moment, he knew he had acted rightly, and that knowledge became a steady light in the years to come. A light no dismissal, no loss, no societal judgment could extinguish. He had paid the price of compassion, and in doing so, he had affirmed its value. Chapter 7. The Rediscovery. For decades, Chiune Sugihara lived quietly, tending to his family, performing modest work, and moving through life with the humility that had always defined him. The memories of Kaunas were never far. The cramped office, the endless lines, the faces of those he had saved. Yet they were private, tucked away behind the routines of daily life. Recognition was not something he sought. To him, he had merely done what any conscientious human being might do when confronted with suffering. Then, decades later, the world began to take notice. Survivors of Sugihara's quiet heroism, the men, women, and children who had crossed borders on visas inked by his hand, began searching for the man who had altered the course of their lives. They wrote letters, shared photographs, and told stories of the family members who had survived, thrived, and built futures because of one man's courage. The first letters were tentative. They came from distant countries: Israel, the United States, Brazil, Australia. They spoke of gratitude, of astonishment, of lives saved in ways the senders had never thought possible. Each envelope was a small testament, a lifeline cast across decades. Sugihara received them quietly, reading them over and over, the words sinking in slowly. He was struck not by fame, but by the tangible evidence of the ripple effects of his choices. Soon, visits followed. Survivors traveled from far-flung corners of the globe to meet the man who had saved their parents, grandparents, and, in some cases, themselves. They arrived with children and grandchildren, holding his hand, tears flowing freely, gratitude overflowing in ways words could barely capture. A woman from Israel brought her daughter and grandchild, explaining that all 3 generations had survived because of the visa her father had received in 1940. A man from the United States told Sugihara that he had been born in Japan only because his mother had been able to escape, visa in hand, just in time. These reunions were profound, humbling, and at times overwhelming. Sugihara, who had never considered himself a hero, now faced the human embodiment of his choices. The weight of years, both lost and gained, settled gently in the room. Yukiko, always at his side, observed quietly, witnessing the tangible impact of the life they had lived in quiet determination. Together, they felt the immense, unspoken validation of decades of moral courage. The recognition expanded. Historians began to document his life. Media outlets covered the remarkable story, and Yad Vashem in Israel extended its highest honor for non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. In 1985, Chiune Sugihara was formally recognized as one of the righteous among the nations. The accolades, though significant, mattered little to him compared to the faces before him. The living proof that one individual's decision could echo across generations. Human stories multiplied. Descendants of refugees recounted how families had survived wars, rebuilt homes, and contributed to societies worldwide. They shared tales of birthdays celebrated, marriages honored, schools attended, businesses built, and lives fully lived, all tracing back to the ink on Sugihara's visas. One man,
holding his daughter's hand, said softly, "We exist because of you. Every step of our family's journey comes from your courage." Sugihara, ever humble, smiled quietly, touched, yet reticent. He had done only what he felt he must. Emotionally, the impact on Sugihara was profound. The decades of quiet sacrifice had been marked by ordinary life, the struggles of work, the laughter and tears of family, the private knowledge of acts done without recognition. Now, the decades of silence were broken not by fame or ceremony, but by human connection. He saw the tangible outcomes of moral courage, not headlines, not awards, but thriving lives, grateful hearts, and the continuation of families that might have been extinguished. The ripple effect was undeniable. Each reunion, each letter, each story reinforced the extraordinary consequences of a single decision made under pressure, in the midst of moral uncertainty. One man, armed only with conscience, a pen, and the courage to act, had changed the course of thousands of lives. Families across continents bore the imprint of his choices, a testament to the enduring power of empathy and action in the face of injustice. For Sugihara, there was no triumphalism. There was only reflection. In the quiet evenings of his later years, surrounded by family, he considered the vast chain of lives set into motion decades earlier. He realized that what mattered most was not the recognition, the awards, or the attention, but the affirmation that a single act of humanity could reverberate through time. That knowledge, that proof of the lasting impact of conscience, was the reward he had carried silently all along. In Rediscovery, Sugihara found the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, according to principle. He had acted, and the world, slowly, had acknowledged it. But more importantly, thousands of lives had flourished, and generations had grown because of a decision made in a small, shadowed consulate in Kaunas. The moral courage of one man had become the living legacy of countless others, forever entwined with his quiet, steadfast heart. Chapter 8: The Legacy of a Pen. Chiune Sugihara's story reminds us that sometimes the simplest tools, a pen, a piece of paper, a human heart, can change the course of history. In a small consulate in Kaunas, 1940, his hand wrote life into existence, hour after hour, day after day. Thousands of names, thousands of lives, thousands of futures were shaped by the choices of one man who refused to look away. His legacy is not measured only in numbers, but in moral courage. Sugihara chose humanity over obedience, compassion over convenience, life over personal safety and career. For decades, he lived quietly, his acts unknown, uncelebrated. Yet the lives he saved and the generations that followed became living proof of the power of conscience. Every child, every grandchild, every family thriving today because of his visas is a testament to one person's courage to act. Sugihara's life invites reflection. What would we do when faced with injustice?
when confronted with suffering that is not our own. Moral courage is not always heroic in the cinematic sense. It often arrives as a quiet decision to help, to stand, to act despite fear or consequence. His story teaches us that empathy, choice, and the willingness to act can ripple far beyond what we can imagine. If Sugihara's life has inspired you, carry that inspiration into your own world. Let it remind you that small acts, words of kindness, standing up for someone in need, choosing conscience over comfort, can echo across time.
And if you want to continue exploring stories of courage, resilience, and human history, join us on this journey. Subscribe to the channel, like this video if it touched your heart, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice, every reflection adds to the story of humanity. In the quiet, a pen can change lives. A heart can choose compassion over fear. And one person's courage can leave a legacy that lives far beyond their lifetime. Chiune Sugihara's pen has long rested, but its imprint endures. In history, in memory, and in all of us who dare to act with conscience.